Now we are live.
Oh, thank God.
Hello and welcome to this year's Devtoberfest. Kind of a funny moment. We were in the wrong live stream, but hope we're now with you. Welcome, a warm welcome from Waldorf this morning. We're at Devtoberfest from SAP, and together with me is Daniela. We have a little bit of problem with our camera. We're the session speaker for overview of ABAP Cloud. Welcome from our side. And before we dive into the topic of ABAP Cloud, we have prepared a little Manymeter quiz for you. Either scan the QR code or go to Manymeter and do the 17, 11, 30, 14. You should also have a link guiding you to the Manymeter quiz. It's not going to be a tough quiz. I see already 31 players arrive. The question is going to be, what is ABAP Cloud? And with that, come on, let's start the quiz. You will have 30 seconds to answer. So what is ABAP Cloud?
It could be a methodological phenomenon. What do you think?
I have absolutely no clue.
Could be cloudy.
Should definitely be cloudy. And now I see that everyone has already voted. And with that, you typically now should see the results. There it is writing. So it's 50-50. Whoa, that surprises me. Half of you said the state-of-the-art ABAP development model, and the other half said it's an SAP Business Technology BTP service, which is unfortunately not the right answer. And nobody said, I have no clue, tell me, which would also have been a valid answer. But we're here for telling you what ABAP Cloud is, giving you an overview. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Daniela.
Yeah, so hi, everyone. Nice for having you. So let's start with the agenda. So we'll go over ABAP Cloud today, and we'll start with why was ABAP Cloud necessary in the first place. So there's, of course, the classic ABAP development model, and there was a need for change. So we'll dive into why that was necessary and what the issues were. In the second part, we'll explain the cloud extensibility model on SAP S for Hana Cloud and how it relates to ABAP Cloud. In the third part, we'll dive right into what ABAP Cloud actually is and what you can do with it. And in the fourth part, we'll tell you how you can use the advantages of ABAP Cloud also if you're an on-premise or a private cloud customer. And with that, let's get right started. So classic custom ABAP, what's the issue? What has happened? Why was there a need for change? So in the classic ABAP development, you can simply modify all SAP objects. So basically, there is no separation between ABAP code and custom code. So that leads to tightly coupled implementations, which makes upgrades really hard. So you have the advantage that there are no restrictions for your extensions. So basically, you can modify the system and make adaptations however you want. That makes classic ABAP powerful and flexible. But on the other side, since there is no separation between ABAP code and your own custom implementations, you never know how an upgrade might damage your own implementations. And that's why software changes on SAP side lead to high test and adaptation efforts after an upgrade. And this also decreases your speed for consuming the innovations we deliver. And that's why there was a need for change. So in the cloud, there is no such thing as a customer-specific upgrade project. So all customer systems are upgraded simultaneously, meaning that we are dependent on a clear separation, a clear interface between ABAP code and custom code. And this is one of the basic principles of ABAP Cloud, which help you in all SAP products that offer ABAP Cloud. So one rule for smooth software upgrades, basically two rules actually. So one thing is now direct modification to SAP objects are allowed. There's always an abstraction layer above an SAP object that allows you to consume it in a stable and lifecycle stable way. But you cannot directly access SAP objects. For example, SAP tables in ABAP Cloud cannot be selected from directly. And the second thing is you can consume specifically released SAP APIs, that is, released development objects locally or remotely, and they enable you to build your own extensions in a lifecycle stable way. And also there are specifically released extension points that also allow you to extend SAP applications, for example, like the sales order app, in a lifecycle stable way. So all of these rules enable a clear interface, a clear separation between SAP code and custom code. And this, to sum it up, enables lifecycle stability and upgrade safety for your own implementations. And as I said, in the public cloud, this is mandatory. So for SAP S/4HANA Cloud and the SAP BTP ABAP environment, ABAP Cloud is the only available development model, but it's also highly recommended in private cloud and on-premise. And why that is, we'll see in the fourth part of our presentation today.
Yeah, and that brings us to SAP S/4HANA Cloud Extensibility Patterns. Daniela mentioned it already. Previously, you were able to use everything, modify SAP coding, which is no longer true for the public cloud. But question is what patterns can you use in SAP S/4HANA public cloud systems? If you're on stack, have an SAP S/4HANA Cloud application, you would like to extend it. First thing is you question yourself, is it a loosely coupled or a tightly coupled application that you would like to build? And if it is a loosely coupled build, not mission critical for your business, so something that can be done on a side-by-side extensibility, you would certainly go for a new application, a side-by-side approach. You could use, for example, the SAP Business Technology Platform, for example, an ABAP environment system. And if you would like to consume those APIs, Daniela mentioned already, you would use a remote API call, or, for example, consume an event provided via the event mesh, but you would go for public remote APIs to the S/4HANA Cloud application. Additionally, you could go for a public local API directly on stack if there is something more tightly coupled to your core business, so keeping the core clean principle, of course. So if the new application is more tightly coupled, you could do then on-stack developer extensibility or developer on-stack extensibility. And last but not least, if already provided by SAP, there are public extension points. So, for example, sales order would have extension points. You can extend directly, not modify. That is the important point. But you can extend the SAP code, data structures, and user interfaces, and so on and so forth. Again, a tightly coupled extension. And in that case, you, for example, extend an SAP app using, for example, a custom action on a Fiori user interface. So what is the cloud extensibility model in SAP S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition? And we will now restrict to the public edition, the public cloud, as it is the one with the most strict rules, as Daniela mentioned. So first of all, there are two different personas we are talking about. The first one is a business expert, or an artist we also call key user. That business user is typically not a developer, but knows the business quite well. And for this persona, we have tools called low-code, no-code tools, where you can do bits and pieces to modify, no, not modify, but to extend the SAP provided software. There you can, for example, do some custom logic, custom fields, or a body implementation that is already prepared for you, that persona would extend. On the other hand side, the deep down developer, the one really going into the details for development and doing on-stack extensibility by means of a new application, for example, that persona would use an integrated development environment for example, the ABAP development tools in Eclipse, of course, everything transported and so on and so forth. This persona would then really do coding in the system. And that brings us to this tiny matrix, portfolio matrix. So here again, in the upper row, the business expert or the key user, who is using on-stack SAP S/4HANA Cloud key user tools, and on the side-by-side extensibility, for example, the SAP build. And in the lower row, the developer extensibility, who would use the ABAP development environment, the ABAP development tools in Eclipse, the ADT, and on stack, for example, is the SAP S/4HANA Cloud ABAP environment. An artist we called last year embedded steampunk. On the side-by-side extension, typically that developer would use an ABAP environment system, the systems we typically also call steampunk system. Important again to mention, we only allow for upgrade stable and cloud ready custom ABAP code. So there is no classic ABAP you can use in such system, but you have to use ABAP Cloud, which is the topic of today's session, and we will come to that, what ABAP Cloud is in a bit. That is the picture a little bit twisted around, but having the same content just to show you again. So that custom code, like in the refrigerator model, Daniela showed you a couple of minutes ago. So typically, as in classic ABAP development, you could modify, which is no longer true in the public cloud, but you have defined public interfaces that you can use. Here on the left-hand side, the yellow box, the public interfaces to the application stack of SAP S/4HANA Cloud. In the lower part was what was in the previous picture, the SAP NetWeaver, and here it is, let's say, the ABAP basis coding. You also have public interfaces, for example, the business partner that you can use, and the custom extensions or the extensibility options. The extensibility coding is living in the gray box and only using and consuming public interfaces, well-defined public interfaces. On the left-hand side, directly on stack in the system key user extensibility and on-stack developer extensions. And on the right-hand side, that would be, for example, a steampunk system, a BTP ABAP environment system. Then, of course, remote API consumption or using the public interfaces. So again, business partner from the ABAP stack beneath the system, the side-by-side extensions.
Yeah, so we've seen all that you can do in, for example, SAP S/4HANA Cloud, and that's pretty cool, right? So you can build your own applications, do side-by-side extensions, or use key user extensibility. So now you've seen what you can do. Now I would like to answer like how you can do it in a lifecycle and upgrade safe way. And that way is specifically ABAP Cloud. So diving into the details, what is ABAP Cloud? So as we've seen before, ABAP Cloud is not a product, but it's the new ABAP development model, meaning it gives you the tools and the runtime, the design time to design cloud-ready business apps, services, and extensions. ABAP Cloud is available on the BTP with the SAP BTP ABAP environment. It's available in S/4HANA, in SAP S/4HANA Cloud, and it's also available for SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition and SAP S/4HANA.
Yeah, when we started that endeavor, we typically mark 2012 as our starting point. Why do we call it an evolution? When we started with ABAP Cloud, there was definitely a need for us to do something new, but we said there is a lot of custom coding out there, a lot of assets we have, a lot of customers and partners out there, a lot of ABAP solutions out there. We don't want to lose all that stuff, but we would like to transform that not in a disruptive way, but we would like to transform into the cloud, and we would like to do that together with you. We typically mark 2012 as a starting point. The rise of ABAP development tools in Eclipse, the ADT, was released in 2012. And I was there already. There was also the kickoff for core data services for the CDS in 2012. Of course, there has been done a lot of things beforehand. We didn't start in 2012. There was, of course, a lot done before that. Even the computers were there, of course. Then in 2015 came SAP S/4HANA, and we from the ABAP had to do a lot of things to support that new product. We had to support SAP HANA, the new database. We have to support SAP Fiori, of course, also the cloud. So the principles of cloud we have to. And in SAP S/4HANA, there was no modification available. So we had to bring something up. That was the key user extensibility, the first thing already in 2015. Of course, it evolved since then. In 2018, then a huge leap for us, SAP BTP ABAP environment, the artists also known as steampunk systems. And what was a huge endeavor there was also the infrastructure. So for us, being able to operate the ABAP on a hyperscaler, so now available on AWS and Azure, that was a huge leap for us. But in addition, we have to make sure that we can build cloud-ready ABAP extensions on the BTP. And that was the first steps of the ABAP RESTful Application Programming Model, the RAP, which of course also evolved since then. And then last but not least, last year on TechEd, the SAP S/4HANA ABAP environment. So the on-stack developer extensibility was released to customers. And now you can really build cloud-ready ABAP extensions on SAP S/4HANA. And all that comprises ABAP Cloud.
Yeah, so as you've seen, we've a long journey behind us, but finally ABAP Cloud is here. As we said before, it's available in all S4 deployments, as well as the SAP BTP ABAP environment. It's also highly recommended, as we already said, to use it in SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition and SAP S/4HANA, simply to ensure that your custom developments are actually lifecycle stable, even in an on-premise environment. So let's have a look. What does ABAP Cloud actually look like in real life?
Yeah, I'm jumping into the system. So I'm playing the role of a developer right now. Let me disconnect that one. So let me go into the ADT. You see that is my integrated development environment. Here I'm in such a system, and that is as, let's say, standard ABAP class, as you might have created yourself already, a couple of them. I'm using an interface just that I'm able to run that and giving you an output on the console. So you can see that thing is executable. And what you can see here, I have a simple open SQL select statement, and I'm using a well-defined public interface available. So for example, here the list of countries, text from those countries, or for example, I'm selecting from the list of product. Well-defined public interface. But what you can see, for example, here, if I would use something like a well-known call function pop-up to confirm, system tells me, or syntax check tells me, hey there, this is nothing you can use in ABAP Cloud. The use of this function model is not permitted. Most prominently, I would say SAP GUI transactions are no longer there in ABAP Cloud. Same thing holds, and we mentioned that already. If you would like to select from something which is not a released API, but for example, here the business partner table, here I'm told that the use of a table is not permitted in the context of ABAP Cloud, but syntax text also tells me, hey, there is a CDS entity, the iBusiness partner, which might be a good choice for you. Apart from that, you see that is not rocket science. It looks and feels pretty much the same as you might be used to. And there will be a session this afternoon, Classic ABAP, ABAP Cloud for Classic ABAP developers, held by Marcel and Volker, where you can see how they transform, such a classic ABAP development into this brave new world of ABAP Cloud. Beside such a transformation session, there is another session targeted to developer and developer experience, so how we are trying to improve developer experience for ABAP Cloud. The session is called Hello ABAP Cloud, also a DevTober session, also by Marcel and Volker. Please join those two for those DevToberfest sessions. But now coming to what actually is ABAP Cloud.
Yeah, so we finally made it. So you already heard some key concepts behind ABAP Cloud, like the cloud optimized ABAP, and that you can only use released, remote, or local APIs. But what actually is ABAP Cloud? So ABAP Cloud is a development model consisting of an optimized tool set, optimized for different personas, as we've heard before. So there's the key user tools for key users. Of course, there's ABAP development tools for Eclipse, for developer extensibility. So there's an optimized tool set for everyone. The development model is accompanied by the proven ABAP lifecycle management, meaning that ABAP Cloud is fully integrated in the ABAP design time and runtime, and uses the lifecycle management of each of the different products. ABAP Cloud consists of the programming model at its core. That means within the programming model, we have all the technologies. For example, the ABAP language, we have the core data services. We have, of course, RAP, as you've already heard. We've also the technologies to build analytical applications and so on. So all that is part of the technological core of the programming model, where you develop the new applications or the extensions. In addition, you have reuse services and libraries. Reuse services offer out-of-the-box functionality to make your implementation life a little bit easier. So for example, as you might know, there's popular reuse services like application jobs, for example, and so on. So you can reuse them in different contexts and they work out of the box. There are libraries available, for example, like the Xcode library or different ABAP libraries that offer predefined functionality that you can use in your coding. The development model also has several built-in qualities. So of course, as we've already said, and as the name ABAP Cloud also might hint at, one of the built-in qualities are the cloud qualities. So everything you develop with ABAP Cloud is lifecycle stable and can be used in a public cloud environment. And there are other built-in qualities like code quality, for example. So ABAP Cloud has a number of tools and techniques that allow you to check your code, to always use the newest syntax and so on, to document your code. So it supports you in high quality development. So this is what the development model actually is. Another question is, what can you do? And what you can do with ABAP Cloud is described by so-called programming model aspects. The programming model aspects offer you a path in ABAP Cloud for how to develop. And what you can develop are different types of applications or services. So for example, with RAP mainly, you develop transactional applications, meaning that you have apps or services that actually access and change data. You can build analytical applications. Analytical applications expose reports or dashboards that analyze KPIs and business data. You can also build integration services to enable cross-system communication and to exchange data between systems. So one of the use cases for integration services we've seen before is, for example, side-by-side extensions. So these core concepts are at the core of the development model of ABAP Cloud, and they help you to guide you along in your development process in the cloud, or to prepare to go from classic ABAP to ABAP Cloud. So let's have a look at the architecture. So it's a 3-tier model, as very well known. So one of the use cases is you want to build a UI service, meaning in most cases you want to build an SAP Fiori app. So you can select your data from SAP Hana from the database, and then in the domain-specific implementation layer, you implement the actual logic and define the data model. So, for example, at the core of RAP, of a transactional application, is always a RAP business object. A business object consists of the data model and the behavior definition that actually defines the operations. So, for example, create, update, delete operations, and what else a business object can do. At the core of an analytical application is a so-called CDS analytical provider. Analytical applications require multidimensional data model consisting of cubes, dimensions. So there's a so you can model those multidimensional data model with CDS. And in the end, you can expose the data model and the implemented logic in the business service exposure as a UI service. So RAP business objects are exposed as data services, and analytical UI services are exposed in the so-called INA protocol. As we've already mentioned, you can build integration services to enable remote connection, so system-to-system integration. They all build on the same architecture blueprint, so they all rely on this 3D architecture model. You can build integration services, of course, for data, for example. So you can expose the same RAP business object as a UI service or as a web API. You can also build events, for example, to enable asynchronous communication. You have RFC available, and you can also enable SQL services for data integration. In addition, data is not always consumed directly from the HANA database, but maybe in a remote setup. So of course, you can also consume integration services to get data from different systems. And for that, service consumption models are available that help you consume the data. Then there's also, as we've already mentioned before, the reuse libraries and services. So the basic architecture is accompanied by those reuse services and libraries to support your development process and to help you save time in the process. They are the built-in qualities that are actually qualities that are shared by all programming model aspects, meaning that an analytical application fulfills the same cloud qualities as a transactional application. All development in ABAP Cloud builds on the proven lifecycle management that is established with ABAP Cloud, so there is no disruption in any way. And as we've already mentioned, you have an optimized tooling set available. So if you want to do developer extensibility, for example, ABAP development tools for Eclipse is the go-to tool, or the key user extensibility built on the key user tools. But there are many other tools available, and they're all part of ABAP Cloud.
Yeah, Daniela mentioned it already or explained it in detail. So I'm drilling down that abstract programming model or the abstract architecture and go specific for transactional application. And for that, we have the ABAP RESTful application programming model, typically. And there's also a DevTopic session held by Andre. He's talking about what's new in the ABAP RESTful application programming model. I definitely recommend you to go for that session, learning more about the RAP and the RESTful application programming model. Daniela mentioned it already. So typically you have an SAP Fiori user interface on top, and that is how you interact with that transactional application. And of course, also integration services can be used. Beyond or beneath that are event binding, service definition, and projections. We will come to that in a second, having a look into the system. And Daniela told you already there are core data services, CDS entities, and RAP business objects in the domain-specific model and implementation. So that was explained already. I would like to show you that in a glimpse into the system. So here, for example, I have such an application already built in the system. So now going not top down, but bottom up. So we have typically for that application database tables, where the information is, of course, saved in the database later on. Above that, core data services, the data definition, but also the behavior definition. So how the actions are implemented, and also additionally here in the source code library, additional ABAP logic for that application. And last but not least, going up to the business service exposure, we see here in the business service event bindings, but also service definitions and service bindings. And if I go here, for example, to an OData v4 service binding, you can even open the application, have a little preview on how such a Fiori application would look like. That opens up. And that is live. You can see here a typical Fiori application. You might be used to that. And if I switch that, I can even go and have a look at the data. So that is based on our well-known, since years well-known flight model. So we have, for example, here travels. For example, customer Henry is going to Bella Italia. You can drill down in here and do a lot of good things. So that is a transactional application built with the ABAP RESTful application programming model. But that is, as Daniela mentioned, not the only thing that you can do with our ABAP Cloud development model. There is also analytics in there. So thinking about, you could, for example, use the very same core data services view as at the bottom, but you're interested in analytics. So you would like to report something, have a look at, and drill down into the details. Typically, the user interface is an analytic client based on the information access protocol, the INA protocol. Service binding is the very same as for the transactional use case, so service definition, service projections, but in the domain-specific data model, you would have an analytical provider, as Daniela mentioned already or pointed out. And here, a little teaser again. There is a dedicated DevTober session on the embedded analytics with ABAP Cloud, and this is held by Andreas Thiel. Recommend that session if you would like to learn more about analytics in ABAP Cloud. Yeah, and last but not least, Daniela mentioned that already. The business service exposures are not only feeding the user interfaces, but also system-to-system integration. So you have the possibilities to create and expose OData services, SQL services, RFC services. And if it has to be a bit more bare metal, doing all the coding yourself, but have the full flexibility, you can create an HTTP service. Also on our list, but not yet finally arrived to the world, is our SOAP services. And last but not least, here hidden, the business events. And for business events, there's also a DevTober session held by Tatjana, Jens, and Jonas, business events with ABAP Cloud-based applications, if you would like to learn how you can interact asynchronously between the systems. And with that, back to you.
Yeah, so basically we're back where we started. So as you can see, this is our cloud overview map, and we talked about the architecture in more detail, but there's also a lot to learn about reuse service libraries, built-in qualities, and so on. So we recommend that you join the DevTober sessions by Ingo about ABAP profiling with ABAP development tools for Eclipse, and the session by Jörg Michael to learn how to clean your ABAP code in seconds with the ABAP Cleaner. So just to dive deeper into the topic about how to use ABAP Cloud. And then we also recommend as a reference,
I'll have here.
Sorry. Yeah, so there's an overview paper that lists technical use cases and the recommended technologies and makes a comparison between classic ABAP and ABAP Cloud. So you can have a look at that to see what you can do or what you could do in classic ABAP and how you can do it in ABAP Cloud these days. And also to drill down, it also recommends if you should use developer extensibility in ABAP Cloud or key user extensibility, depending on your use case. So we highly recommend that you have a look at that paper. Yeah, and with that, let's get into the last part of our presentation. What about private cloud or on-premise? So we talked a lot about the public cloud and how ABAP Cloud ensures that you can develop in an upgrade safe way. So what about cloud and on-premise? Well, basically, here you can profit from the same advantages that customers in the public cloud have. Basically, you want to profit also like from the same advantages as in the public cloud. So we know that upgrade projects in private edition or on-premise will not go away. So there is no magic, but we can make the upgrade process easier and help you to be prepared for the future. So should you want to switch to public cloud, ABAP Cloud gives you an opportunity to prepare for that. So how can you do that? As we mentioned, ABAP Cloud is also available in SAP S/4HANA and SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition, meaning you can apply the same rules, you can use the same tools as in the public cloud. And if you follow the ABAP Cloud rules also in on-premise, you can take advantage of everything that ABAP Cloud has to offer. That is a clear separation between the SAP code and your own custom code. You also use the cloud optimized ABAP language, you use the tooling and so on. So everything supports you in your on-premise world to develop in an upgrade safe way whenever possible. And from SAP side, it's strongly recommended to use ABAP Cloud for any greenfield development that you're starting, or if you're refactoring your code and it's possible, we highly recommend to use ABAP Cloud to achieve the so-called clean core. How can you do that? So basically, the cloud optimized ABAP builds on a concept called an ABAP language version. So the ABAP language version determines the scope of the syntax and which development objects can be accessed in your code. So, and in classic ABAP, you use the so-called standard ABAP language version. As we mentioned before, when SAP BTP ABAP environment was introduced in 2018, we introduced also a new ABAP language version specifically for cloud development, the so-called ABAP for Cloud Development language version. With that language version, you do cloud development, ABAP cloud development in on-premise, and you switch your development object to that language version. And then you basically develop like you would do in a public cloud environment, meaning you can only access released APIs from SAP side. And with that, you achieve the same interface between the SAP code and the public code. And with that, Jasmin will show you how to do that.
Yeah, we'll give you again a glimpse into the system that actually also holds true if you're a partner and you prepare something for your customer. You can also, of course, release your provided API. So you say, okay, I will not change anything disruptively. So whenever my customer upgrades, he or she can use that in a lifecycle upgrade stable way. But going into the system, and beforehand, we had that class. And I could have shown you that already beforehand. If I'm going to the properties section of that class, you can see that the language version of that class is already ABAP for cloud development. And that is actually the case if you're in the public cloud or in the steampunk system, a BTP ABAP environment system, the default and the only option will be the ABAP for cloud development. But thinking about something here, I have a package that I would like to prepare, for example, for going into the cloud. So here, let's say I'm in a private cloud system or an on-prem system, and I have here a class which has the same thing. So the select from the business partner, and I would like to transform that repository object, that class, into something ready for the cloud. Then I would go for the ABAP language version. I have to switch that around. I can edit that and switch that to ABAP Cloud development. And once done that, you see the syntax check relies now on the ABAP Cloud language, ABAP for Cloud development language. And I'm no longer to do so because that is not permitted in ABAP for Cloud development. Of course, having something like 15,000 classes, you would not do that on a one-by-one basis. Typically, you would create yourself a software component or at least a package. And you can also switch the default ABAP language version here directly in ABAP for Cloud development. And that serves for new classes. If I'm now creating here myself a new ABAP class, just call it like that. And you can see once created, you see a transport ABAP that is in $TMP, so not transported, but you see the pop-up arising. So once switching in the package to ABAP for Cloud development as default, you see that my newly created ABAP class here, the simple demo, will directly be an ABAP language version, ABAP for Cloud development. And with that, starting a new application development or starting a renovation of your coding, you can directly try to achieve the ABAP for Cloud or using the ABAP Cloud development model, even in an on-prem or private cloud system. And that brings me to the three-tier extensibility model of SAP S/4HANA private cloud and on-prem. So if we were in the ideal world, you could try to achieve everything in tier 1. So that plays the complete rule set of ABAP cloud development, either on stack in the SAP S/4HANA or in the side-by-side approach, also the tier 1 full ABAP cloud for extensibility. However, you have to rely on public released API, and there might be an API for you missing that you desperately need. And if that is the case, we recommend the tier 2 approach, so cloud API enablement. The idea is that you wrap the existing but not released API by yourself by a custom wrapper, request the API enablement on our side. And once that is then finally SAP released, you can retire that wrapper and go back to the tier 1 mode. There is a dedicated session by Alexander and Kai on the cloud API enablement for SAP private editions, SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition. Recommend that DevTober session as well to hear about this enablement process. And of course, also the general very good session by Olga and Thomas on custom code adaptations to SAP S/4HANA and ABAP Cloud. Well, that would be the good side of the story, but of course, there will also be kind of a dirty corner, let's say like that, the tier 3. So things that will never be transformed into this upgrade stable lifecycle stable upgrade safe tier 1 or tier 2 track. That is the tier 3, the classic ABAP development in the private cloud and on-premise. But the idea is to keep that at a minimal level to improve your upgrade projects. So things that you will no longer need, please try to retire that, renovate and innovate into the tier 1 or at least tier 2 direction, and adopt to keep really the tier 3 at a minimal level, because here are the pain points for upgrade projects. And with that, we're at the end of our session already. So ABAP extensibility for SAP S/4HANA is crucial for us, for the success of SAP, but also for your success, being customers and partners out there. It provides, by means of on-stack and side-by-side extensibility, the option to extend the provided software. We are supporting key users and developer extensibility alike, and also the recommendation when to use what. And well, ABAP Cloud is our development model to build extensions.
Yeah, and as we learned in the session, so ABAP Cloud is the ABAP development model to be cloud ready. With ABAP Cloud, you can build cloud ready business applications, services, and extensions. That holds true for the SAP BTP ABAP environment, SAP S/4HANA Cloud, as well as SAP S/4HANA and SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition. And even in the Private Edition and for SAP S/4HANA, it's highly recommended to use ABAP Cloud whenever possible to invest in future safe development. And with that, we are at the end of our...
And beyond the DevTober sessions, there are also other things where you can get more information. And with that, we would like to open for questions, right? Nah, please, organizers, I'm a bit lost. I'm not sure how. I'm sorry. I think
So we have a few in the chat. I'll read some of them out for you. So to the one that. So we have a question that says, what will happen to legacy development objects in private cloud or on-prem? Is SAP going to stop support them?
Well, as mentioned, that is, I think, the tier 3 box. So there's nothing like we throw them away, discontinued, of course not. Well, there are the pain points. It is a good idea to have a close look if all of them are still needed, or if they can be transformed into something in the tier 1 or tier 2 mode. So there won't be anything thrown away or discontinued, of course not. But the thing is, you really have to have a look at those things after the upgrade, if still everything works. So especially in on-prem, I mean, you have to check that everything runs after the upgrade smoothly.
I have another one here. How do we migrate the old business application to ABAP Cloud?
How all of them are transformed into the cloud? Well, there will be dedicated sessions on that, and I truly recommend to join them, because I mean, there is no genie in the model. You can just say, hey, I would like to transform in the cloud, but there is a lot of help for you out there. So custom code adaptations, for example, the session by Olga and Thomas, that will show you how a lot of things can be done in an assisted way, let's say like that. But of course, the business expert need to have a look, and there is no just a transformation button, transform it, and everything is now cloud ready. Yeah.
If you want like more details about the clean core approach, you can search for the ABAP extensibility guide online or in Google. It explains the model in more detail. Yeah, so the one shown here on the lower left, it gives you additional insights on how the 3-tier model that we briefly explained here is actually like applied in practice, and what that might mean for your development.
And then let's see, maybe we can answer just a couple more. Here's one. Can ABAP Cloud on-stack extensions be made backward compatible with SAP ECC?
That is a good question. I mean, once you rely on the public released APIs and they are not available on the ECC system, I think that is quite tough. That really depends. I mean, that really depends. The question is if you would rather go directly for the SAP S/4HANA, right? So the question is if you would like to develop something with a new paradigm in the new system and then transport it back to the old ECC system, or whether, well, yeah, that is a pretty tough question, I would say. But something. Yeah, something one would have to look at it in more detail. I mean, it's hard to judge now on this high-flying level. By the way, where do you see those questions?
The questions are in the chat on the live session link.
Okay.
We can answer one more, and then the speakers will answer the questions after we get off live. So they can answer directly to the specific participant. So the last one, what do you recommend for users as a central entry point for accessing the apps when having S4 on-prem and side-by-side extension in BTP Business Central Launchpad? This has already been answered.
Well, typically first steps into this ABAP Cloud world, I would say it is definitely the trial system we offer in the BTP ABAP environment. So the steampunk systems, they can have a first look and feel into such a system, how you can interact, how this ABAP for cloud development language model feels, and how this, let's say at the first view, restrictions feel in such a system. That is definitely something I would recommend to go into that first. Yeah, definitely. Trial system.
Yeah, it's the best way to actually experience ABAP Cloud hands-on.
Yeah, and definitely in the SAP community or in or there even tutorials, you can try out yourself. You have a guided tutorial where you can have your first steps, also with the RESTful application programming model. And actually also how you can access such a trial system. I think that is one of the first steps you would do.
Actually, a little clarification there. That was a good answer to how to get started with the language, but I think the person wanted to know the end user central entry point, because they went on to ask, should we use business client, central launchpad, etc.
Yeah, and there is also this. I have to look it up. I have to look the link up. But you can also have a try on those applications. There is this S/4HANA where you can have a look and feel on, for example, sales order, how that looks in S/4HANA public cloud, if I remember correctly. But that is something I would need to look up. That is a question I would like to answer offline, if that is okay with you.
Yep. Like we said, the speakers will answer the questions in the chat. And with that, Jasmin and Danielle, would you like to close off on this session?
Thanks a lot for joining us with this kickoff session of ABAP Cloud Tracks and Devtober. And have a lot of fun in Devtober this year.
And enjoy all the other sessions. We highly recommend that you tune in on them. And thanks for joining.
Bye.